So the
Here
major
today, Larry and I with a very special guest. We've got Zev Freidus today. Zev is a man that wears many different hats. He's, first of all, a very successful real estate broker. He created and founded and then later sold a very successful real estate brokerage here in Boca Raton in the South Florida area. And Zev now has restarted a new brokerage, which we'll get into and talk about kind of that journey that you've had. You're also a multifamily and commercial real estate investor. So I want to talk about your experience in investing in properties. But the most important thing that Zev is that he's my brother-in-law. So wanted to disclose that up front. I don't have you here today because you are family. I have you here today, and Larry, we invited you, and Larry's gotten to know you well as well. And we're excited to have you because of your experience in the real estate industry, and that I've worked with you for about 5 years now on a variety of different issues. And you know, you're someone that I really trust. You've got tons of knowledge, depth and breadth of knowledge in the real estate industry, both residential and commercial, that I think the audience really could learn from. So welcome. Great to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Sure. So what I love to do with guests is I always like to get their background, kind of where they came from and how they got to this place that they're at and this place of success. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you grew up, where you grew up, and go from there.
Sure. So I actually grew up on a farm in upstate New York, where I did farm chores before catching the bus to school in the morning. I left home when I was about 19. I moved to the city because there weren't really many jobs up there.
But you're one of 9 kids, is it?
9 children.
9 children. Yeah. So wow. Yeah, that's. I just wanted to point that little data point out. That's kind of rare. Not many people. You know, I have 2 siblings, and I thought that was a lot. But that's
And my childhood was definitely unique. Growing up on a farm with 9 children,
sure.
We were definitely different.
Yeah.
I was self-conscious of that growing up. But looking back, it really built character. And if you look at all of my siblings, we've all been successful in different areas of life. And what we all have in common is that character building of growing up on the farm. So got to give credit where credit is due.
Absolutely. Yeah. Good.
So anyway, I moved to the city when I was, I think, 19. My parents knew before I did that computers would be a good thing for me. This was, again, in the early 90s. PCs were just getting started. This was before the internet. And I remember it was a big deal to make one computer talk to another,
Sure.
like with a cable.
With a cable, that was it, yeah.
Right.
You play a game. I remember playing games in the early 90s with my friends. You'd have to connect the cables and
because
have the intranet. Yeah.
Right. Well, if computers couldn't talk to each other, then they were very limited what they could do. They could replace typewriter, things like that, play games. But getting computers to network, to talk to each other, first even locally, then across, once the internet started, that's really what changed the whole game. So anyway, this was before all that. I got a minimum wage job in Brooklyn, working for a company that manufactured computer parts. And I literally worked in the basement in the shipping department, packing boxes. But I paid attention. I would take the manuals home with me at night. I'd read them. I watched the guy who used to test the parts before he passed them to me to pack them. I watched what he did, and when he quit, I told the boss, I think I could do what he does, which is basically just plug them in and see that it boots up and put it in a box.
Okay, well, that's a start.
I went from there. Then the company wanted to set up a network in the office so they could share a printer. So no one knew how to do it, so I said, I'll read the book. So did. And so on and so forth. I taught myself. I just read whatever I could get my hands on related to computers. And eventually I taught myself a few different programming languages. Long story short, I eventually moved to Florida in 1998.
And you hadn't touched real estate yet at this point?
I had not. One of the main reasons I moved to Florida was because I had an interest in real estate. So here I was in New York, waking up at 4 a.m. to take a train to a bus to go into the city, make good money, but have nothing left at the end of the month. And then wanted to buy a home and realized that at the rate I was going, I didn't know if I would ever be able to own a home in New York. You can go to the city every day and you work in these huge buildings and, there's thousands of people in a building. And, maybe 5 people on the top floor in the executive suites are the ones that could afford to buy a place on Park Avenue. Everybody else takes the train and the bus out to their little humble
abode on Long Island or or wherever.
And most will never
Queens,
get out of that rat race.
Sure, understood.
So I decided to move to Florida. Primarily, I only knew Florida because my grandma lived here. So I had been here, and it was beautiful. And then I figured out, and this was 1998, so I figured out that while I could never afford a house in Brooklyn, I could buy a decent house in Boca with a backyard and a pool for maybe $200,000.
Nice.
So
those were great prices.
Right. Those were the days.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
1998, I moved to Florida. I had, I think, $50,000 as a down payment. Came to Florida and I said, I called my mortgage guy and I said, instead of putting 20% down, could I put 10% down? And he said, yes, you'll pay PMI. You might pay a higher rate, but you could do it. So instead of buying a house, I bought 2 houses. And I rented one and I lived in one.
Smart. Okay, so you bought your 2 properties.
That second property I bought actually with no money down.
Wow, how'd you do that?
So I didn't know anything, and I wasn't a licensed real estate broker at the time because I know now that this is not okay.
Maybe we need to edit this out.
No.
It's the statute of limitations is up on this. So. Joking. I'm joking.
I told the realtor who was trying to sell it to me, I said, okay, I'll take it, but you have to find me a tenant for this before we close, which he did. So I took the first last on security. That was half of my down payment. And the other half I put on my credit card. It was only $5,000, right?
It's amazing.
And I remember...
I'm not sure that's a proper source of funds now for loans, but yeah.
Totally.
Maybe back then, 20-some years ago.
Back then, I didn't know anything. I wasn't a professional in this industry. I was just trying to own property.
But you did it right.
But it worked.
At the time, it worked. Yeah.
I remember the closing of that townhouse. I won't say the name. A prominent attorney in Boca went to his office, and he started questioning me at the closing why my address was not the property address. And I said, because I'm not going to live there. And he's like, well, then why are you buying it? And I said, it's an investment. And he just looked at me and said, maybe where you come from in New York, real estate is an investment, but in Florida, real estate's not an investment.
Wow, that was his mindset?
This was 1998.
Oh my gosh.
But you have to understand that this $99,000 townhouse had probably been worth $99,000 since it was built
for years
in the 80s. Mm-hmm. So, real estate hadn't really gone anywhere. But it doesn't matter. Even then, it's not that I was such a genius because I knew the future and I knew that Florida was going to explode. No. Even if it didn't, even if it stayed the way it was still a good investment.
Sure.
Because if you understand real estate, you understand. So you buy something, $99,000. Let's say it stays $99,000 forever. I still bought it with no money down, or let's say $10,000 down. And by now, the mortgages if everything stayed on plan, mortgage would be practically paid off. Mm-hmm. And for my $10,000, I'd have $100,000. Plus all the rent that comes in.
And all the rent, all the cash flow over those 20 plus years.
The fact that Florida...
And the tax depreciation from that too.
Correct. Yeah. Right. Yeah. The fact that Florida took off is
that's just the icing on the cake.
Right.
Yeah.
But I will say I was kind of hoping for that. I mean, coming from New York, this was the whole reason I left. So I had a good job, worked like a dog, but my landlord was the rich guy in town. He didn't work as hard as me. He wasn't as smart as me, didn't know as much as I did. So why was my whole paycheck going to him? And the answer was very simple, because he was in the right place at the right time, because he came to Brooklyn 20 years before, when I was a baby, when things were affordable, and he bought up rental properties. And now here I am, a young professional trying to make ends meet. I'm giving my whole paycheck to him. And then I realized that not only is he taking my whole paycheck, he's taking 20 or 30 or 50 people's paychecks.
Yeah.
So ever since then, I've had this motto.
And the funny thing is, now you're that guy, and all the millennials and Gen Zers who can't afford a home or paying you rent. So,
correct. But ever since that day, I've been saying I want to be the landlord.
Of course.
People, there's all kinds of jokes. People go to a show and they start counting the rows and say, how much are they making here, charging this much. I do something different. Anywhere I go, any event, I just look around and I'm like, what a nice business. I'd love to be their landlord. Right? Well, I mean, everyone, as the business owner, you get paid last.
Sure.
But who gets paid first? Your rent.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. So good. So you bought a couple properties, and then at what point did you get into becoming a
So what
realtor?
happened is, so now I had 3 properties. That's great. I had a house I lived in. I had 2 investment properties. I never could have done that in New York, so that was great, except I had no money left. The rental properties were not really making money. They were carrying themselves.
Sure.
To me, at the time, and it really, not much has changed since then. It's really very simple. If you can acquire an asset and it carries itself, then whatever cash flow is left over is really just a freebie. It's what I call getting paid to wait. Because the real reward is over the long run from the appreciation and from paying down the debt. But whatever excess cash you have every month after you pay the debt, that's just getting paid to wait. But on these properties, that was next to nothing. So I couldn't live on that. So I needed to find a job. So I started looking for a job. And remember, this is the 90s. It's not today where the job market is healthy here in Florida. Back then, and this all goes together, is why prices were lower. This area was really like a second home, vacation, seasonal place. And all the wealthy people up north had a place in Boca. But
there was very little industry here.
Correct.
I think the IBM was here for a short while, but they had left by the early 90s.
Correct.
There was at that time, the only jobs you'd find here really were service jobs or financial industry. Finance meaning people who would, manage rich people's funds down here.
Right, but even that was very limited.
And real estate. Yeah.
Even that was very limited. So I was working at the time when I left New York. I was working in the city. I was working for a subsidiary of Reuters. So I was working on Wall Street. I was a tech person. So I was managing the computer systems for trading floors. So Reuters would put me on site every day for a year. I was at Bear Stearns for like a year. I was at Prudential Securities for about a year. So come down to Florida, and all of those same clients all had offices here. So I thought, I have an in. And I did have an in. I had recommendations from New York. They made introductions. The problem was that all of these offices down here are just sales offices, or were just sales offices. There was no IT jobs. There was no trading floors. It was really just sales office. Finding a job here was not. So in New York, if you don't like your job, you open up the New York. This was back then. You open up the New York Times, and next Monday you're starting at your new job.
A new job. Yeah.
Wow. But it wasn't like that here. So I ended up finding a job with a local company. It was actually a spin-off of IBM before IBM left. And they were a manufacturer of industrial security. It just so happened that the technology they were using was the same technology that I was working on at Reuters. Completely different industry, but the same technology. So they hired me as a sales engineer. And it's interesting why I qualify for that job. And this is still an issue to this day in Florida, whereas the work ethic here is very, vacation mode, very casual, flip-flops. Whereas in New York, even when I was at the bottom, I always wore a suit and tie every day to work. I mean, you couldn't walk into Bear Stearns if you weren't dressed properly. So just coming to Florida with my New York work ethic is why they hired me for that job, because I was a sales engineer. You have to be technical. You have to be able to answer all the questions. But you have to be presentable. You have to go on sales calls with the sales guy, right? So most tech guys are not presentable. You can't bring them with you to a presentation to the board of directors of General Motors. You just can't do it because the guys, just
embarrassing,
right? Yeah. So me being used to wearing a suit and tie and working in the city, it was a perfect fit for me. So I did that for a few years. I got to learn the product line very, very well. I climbed the ladder. I ended up becoming a product marketing manager for this security system. Long story short, the company I was working for got bought out by GE, and here I was a product marketing manager for GE.
Good company.
That's where I used to work.
And you also have very similar GE you work for, and you were sales engineer. That's crazy.
I think we talked about this once. Yeah. It was kind of a dream job, and here I was living where I wanted to live. The challenge I ran into is, time gets away from you. So here I am, I'm traveling all over the world. By the way, I recommend it for young people. Get a job with a big multinational company in a role that requires travel when you're young.
See the world
See
when
the
you're
world
in your
with
20s.
the company's credit card.
Right.
So I did that for a while, but time gets away from you and years go by, and I realized I still own 3 properties.
Yeah.
I'm like, but this is not why I came down here. Was not my mission.
How old were you at that moment?
Well, I was 23 when I moved down here, so I was probably around 30 when I'm coming to.
And by this time, you had a young family. You had 2 children and you were married at that time.
I was married. I had 2 children. I was making it work. I was paying my bills. I had built a new house, but I had to sell the house I was living in to buy that, so I still had 3 houses. But I built a new house in West Boca. Those are the days when you could build new construction in West Boca for $100 a foot, including the land.
Wow.
But that doesn't exist anymore.
Now $500 a foot, but yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I realized that I haven't bought any more real estate in a number of years. But another thing that had happened over the years, so here I am, I'm working at GE, people like to talk at the coffee machine or whatnot. And I don't know, it somehow got around that I own 3 houses, which like no big deal, but for the typical 9-to-5er,
It's a big deal.
Right.
Well, that's how it felt
deal.
at GE as I was acquiring apartment buildings. People were like, what is going on with this guy? Like, oh my gosh. Like,
Was he
nobody was
shady
doing
or
this. Yeah.
But people used to stop me at the coffee machine and say, I heard you own 3 houses. I'm still trying to figure out how to own 1.
Yeah.
And I would just talk to people just like we are now about leverage, about creative ways to come up with down payment money. So when I realized that I was not reaching my goals in acquiring real estate, I decided to quit my job, which was kind of crazy because it was kind of a dream job. But I realized
That's very bold.
Well, okay, you know what it was? There was everyone has these moments where something snaps, right? Mm-hmm. So I had this product line. It was responsible for like 55% of the revenue of the entire division. And in fact, that product line I was responsible for was so successful that it was 3 out of 4 Fortune 500 and 4 out of 5 Fortune 100 companies all use that product.
Wow.
So I have my annual review, and they tell me you're doing a great job, you're doing an amazing job. We're going to give you the maximum raise, 3%.
Wow. Barely keeping up with inflation.
And I just said to myself, I didn't even appreciate or understand inflation and all of that the way I do now, but I just remember thinking to myself, I know what I'm trying to do, can't get there from here at this pace. Yeah. And then I looked over, I was in a cubicle. I'm not knocking, GE is a wonderful company. I'm in a cubicle every day, and my boss, who was the vice president of marketing, sat right next to me in the next cube. Now, he was a vice president, so he had a cubicle that was 2 feet by 2 feet wider and longer than mine. And instead of a Formica desk, he had a fake wood desk. And I remember thinking, and he had gray hair. And I remember thinking, I don't want to be him. I want to spend the next 20 years to upgrade my cubicle
that's what
and still be doing this.
Yeah.
So I quit my job.
Yeah.
And I really didn't know what I was going to do. But I figured people are always asking me for advice on real estate. So I'll get my real estate license. And if I could get paid for giving this advice, then I could defer my search for a new job. So I sold my neighbor a house. And I remember that the commission was approximately equal to 1 month's pay at my job.
Okay.
And I said to myself, okay, so I just bought myself a month.
Yeah.
If I can do this again, I can buy myself another month. If I can do this repeatedly, I don't have to go back to work.
I could buy myself out of a cubicle. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I did that a couple more times. And then I ran into a problem that most realtors run into, which is, so the real estate industry, and this is crazy because now we're sitting here today, 20 plus years later, and it's still kind of the same. If you read any of the books, if you listen to any of the experts who tell you how to be a successful realtor, they tell you that you have to capitalize on your sphere of influence. Everybody needs a house. Hand out your business cards to everybody, to your mechanic, to your babysitter, to your psychiatrist. Everybody needs a house. And there's nothing wrong with that, and that's true, but that's pretty primitive. Me, again, I had just come out of a huge company. I was in their marketing department, so I did learn a lot, more than I realized, by the way. All the years that I was there, I did I saw the world, but I didn't really appreciate the education I got from working for them until I started my own business. And I realized that I would constantly think back to things I learned at GE about marketing and apply them. And I think that was very helpful. So I sold a few houses to a few people I knew. And then I ran into the same problem that everyone has, which is you exhaust your sphere of influence. And all your friends, all your relatives are settled into their new homes. And now what? You still need to make a living, right? So you need to have something more than just relying on friends and family. You have to have some way of reaching the masses. So this was now 2005, 2006. So being a self-taught programmer and knowing a little bit about marketing, I put together a website, did some basic search engine optimization, and started generating some leads online for real estate. Again, this was 2005, 2006, right before Zillow started. So the competition really, was non-existent. In fact, not to get too technical, but I remember back then that the MLS data was simply not indexed on Google. So in other words, you would have realtor websites where you could go and you could see the listings, but that data was not indexed. And what I mean by that is this: the only way back then to show listings on your website was what they call like an iframe. So basically, there's a URL that will bring the listings, and you box it in like a window inside your website, so people will click here and then they could see it. But that data is not crawlable by Google.
Mm-hmm. So Google didn't know it was there, right?
Right.
Like it's just like
it's not reading it and pulling it into its database that's searchable.
Correct.
Right. It's not searchable.
Correct. So I realized this because there's only so much you could say on your website, about what a wonderful realtor you are. That's gonna, get traction in Google. But the listing data is content. Now it's not so much, because now it's indexed 100 times over from every single broker website, and there's higher authority sites like Zillow and Realtor.com that have that data too, and that's indexed by Google. So now having listing data is not really the secret, but back then it was.
What is the secret?
We'll get to that later.
So back then I just realized
that's why Larry's here. He's waiting with bated breath to hear the secret. Yeah.
So I basically called up the MLS and said, can I get your data in raw format? And they were like, well, yeah, we could give you a FTP CSV file every day. And I was like, okay. So I scripted something to pull that file every day and put it into my own database and then publish it on the web, and then it got indexed. So I was literally one of the first, at least in this market. I don't know, other parts of the country, I'm sure there were people figuring out some of the things. But at the time, that just shot me right to the top of Google. So I was number one Google for everything from, Boca Raton Real Estate to Boca Raton Realtor to addresses. You just put in an address of a house, and our phone would ring all day long.
I was going to ask it. So as soon as you cracked that code, you started getting calls, huh?
So I did that, and then I got an award from the Florida Association of Realtors for having the best broker website in the state of Florida. Uh-huh. And let me tell you, it didn't look that impressive, okay?
The award didn't.
I might have understood indexing and marketing, but I didn't even have a professional designer. So, and it showed. And yet I won this award.
Uh-huh. That just shows the competition you were up against.
Exactly. Yeah. That's how low the bar was.
Right. Yeah.
So for sure I had the advantage of just being first. But in any industry, that's always
first mover's advantage is huge.
Yeah.
But the key is that you had that idea. That was you that figured it out. And I want to go back to, Zev. He brought something up earlier, and I know Zev, known him for years now, so I can speak to this. You brought up how you got started in computers and how you would go fiddle with the computers and figure them out and take them apart. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what you do. And that's what you're best at, is figuring out how the little pieces are a part of the bigger puzzle. Mm-hmm. And you break it down and then you put it back together again. And that's one of your kind of secret key sauces, I guess, your secret sauce.
I'll tell you
to your
why.
success. One of them. Yeah.
I don't think that winning ticket ever is reinventing the wheel. So any invention, current day invention, is really incremental. It's always standing on the shoulders of the people before us and saying, what can we do on top of this? So with that thinking, it's exactly what you said. You take technologies and things that exist, that are out there, and you say, okay, how can I put this all together and build something with these pieces?
Yep, I agree completely. So back to this. So you created a really good website that was starting to drive traffic to your. Had you started your brokerage already? I guess, right?
I did. So there's a little period of time in there that I worked for someone else. So
as an agent,
right? So when you get your real estate license, you have to work for a broker for 2 years before you could get your broker license. So I was actually still had my day job. I hadn't even left yet. I got my license. And I really didn't want to go work for one of the big companies. Everyone said, go to Coldwell Banker, go to Remax. Yeah, go to one of the big companies and learn the industry. And my thinking was just the opposite. If I go to one of the big companies and learn the industry, I will end up like everyone else in the industry. It just seems logical. But if I want a fresh look, if I want new ideas, I want a new perspective, I don't want to be influenced by the current thinking. So I hung my license with a friend of mine who really just had a broker's license for his own use. He was just flipping houses, whatever. So I put my license with him, and I rented an executive suite, and I sat there and I started to think about SEO and all that stuff. So I went to my friend who had my license, and I said, "Listen, I have a proposition for you." It's really true what they say about like goal setting. It's like once you put it down on paper, it kind of ends up being what happens. So I put together, basically it was an Excel spreadsheet, a 1-page, no complicated formulas, basically just a few columns and a few assumptions. I said, okay, we can make a website, we could generate, I don't know, this many leads and this many closings and this many agents, this much commission, this much profit. I just best guessed it. And I went to my broker and I said, listen, I will do this for you, but we need to make a deal and you need to fund it. And he was just like, no. And I remember he had a partner.
A real big thinker.
Well, he had a partner, and his partner was like, oh, I believe in Zev. We should do this. And he was like, no, we're real estate investors. We're not startup investors. We're not. So I said, okay. I honestly, I really want to do my own thing, but I felt loyal, and which I don't know that really loyalty was warranted in that situation. You don't really owe anyone anything just because you work for it. But I was kind of guy.
It's a life lesson, yeah.
So I was like, oh, I can do this with them. The one who was against it won that argument, so I said okay, and I went on my own. The rest is history.
Blessing in disguise, maybe.
Yeah. Right.
Huge blessing in disguise. Yeah.
And it's So it's interesting though because so I went on my own, came up with the name. I don't know if people have been around here in Boca a long time, they might remember it was Boca Executive Realty, and the way I came up with that name was from my training at GE. I remember clearly my mentor at GE, we had a meeting once in conference room about marketing, and he said the following. He said, when you name a product, it needs to say everything that the consumer needs to know before buying it about it in the name. Meaning, if let's say you want to make a word processor to compete, go back 20 years ago. So let's say you want to make a word processor to compete with WordPerfect, right? So Microsoft did that with Word. So how do you upseat such a entrenched, that WordPerfect was the word processor. Well, the naming is a big part of it. And what did they call it? Microsoft Word. Why? Because what does this tell you? It's a word processor. And why is it different than WordPerfect? Because it's made by Microsoft. So literally, Microsoft Word tells you everything you need to know why you should try this over WordPerfect, right? Sure. Simple.
Yeah.
So I sat down and I said, okay, I want to be a high-end real estate broker in Boca. So toyed around with some names, Boca Executive Realty won because the domain name was available.
Yeah.
And it met the criteria. It explained what I wanted to be.
It does sound high end, the executive part for sure.
Started that, put together the website, started generating leads. And it's interesting how a year later, the numbers were pretty close to.
I was going to ask you if that spreadsheet, if that was pretty accurate.
I don't even remember what the numbers were, but I remember realizing a year later that it was actually pretty.
So within about a year, you were hitting your goals.
So we started generating leads. People would just call, and it's kind of funny. They would think that every listing on the MLS was my listing.
Great.
They would just Google whatever they would Google, and they would see a listing with my picture and my number next to it, and they would just assume it's mine.
So you're generating tons of buyer leads through
leads.
that. Yeah,
all buyer
which
leads.
is great.
Right. So it quickly became more than I could handle. Me selling my next house to not have to go back to work was a thing of the past. I was at the time, I was living in this neighborhood where I built this house for like $400,000, and I sold my neighbor's house, I think, for like $500,000. And most realtors find themselves in this situation where they get stuck into a price point based on the circles they go in or the neighborhood that they live in. And then it becomes harder to break into a neighborhood that costs twice as much money. But of course, it's the same work and the commission is twice as much, so everybody wants to.
Sure.
So once I put up this website and started generating some leads, I quickly realized that I can do SEO for any community in Boca, and there's a lot of them. I started generating leads in country clubs and selling, instead of $500,000 houses, selling $1.5 million houses. And again, remember, this was 2006.
Yeah.
Those houses today are,
3 and 4 million.
Right.
Sure. And would you have just a separate web page for each one, or a separate URL for each web address for each community? So let's say St. Andrews, you would have a completely separate St. Andrews site, or it would be on your Boca Executive page.
So URL just means every page has
a web address, has a URL.
Sorry. I think you mean
I'm asking
domain.
the wrong question.
Right.
A separate domain. Sorry.
No, I mean, listen, SEO has changed so much in the last 20 years. There was a time where that worked. And then there was a time where they punished you for that.
Got it. So it goes back and forth, right?
Yeah.
Understood.
And that's the big challenge with SEO is you do all the stuff that Google wants or you think Google wants, because Google will never tell you what they want. They purposely obfuscate it because otherwise everyone just games it. So you never really know what they want. Everyone is doing their best guess with their eyes closed of trying to figure out what Google wants, and you do it, and some of it works, and you have success, and then Google flips it literally upside down on you, and what was good yesterday is now they'll punish you for today.
You were at the top of page 1, and now you're at the bottom of page 3. Yeah.
Sometimes page 3 is not so bad. Try page. There's a minus 10 penalty that puts you down 10 pages.
Wow. Well, what's the adage I heard? Someone said something to the effect of, if you're not on page 1, you might as well be nowhere.
So it's funny because
what's the best way to hide a dead body on the second
page of Google? I think that's it.
One of the many things that happened along the way that made me realize I was doing something right was I was doing this SEO, and this might have been a couple more years into it, and I get a book in the mail signed by the author. Never heard of him. Never heard of the book, but the author sent it to me. And the name of the book was Page 1 or Die.
Wow. That's it. I always say the SEO stuff is a nuclear arms race, and you kind of have to do it, but everyone's doing it, and it's a lot of work, and there are winners in it though. And honestly, for our law firm, we've done fairly well on our landlord-tenant side of things with our evictions, and we rank really high with certain aspects of real estate law in this area, and then we do pay-per-click advertising and all that good stuff, and it definitely drives leads. So, but all of this that you're talking about was in the mid-2000s, right? 2005, 6, 7, 8, and moving forward. So you were an early mover, first mover advantage. And so you started doing the SEO for different communities, and it's driving in lots of leads. At this point,
So let me tell you how I built the business around this. So someone would call off the internet, want to buy a house. I take them. I'd literally sit at my desk doing SEO, and the phone would ring and say, I want to go see 123 Apple Street. I'd say, okay, I'll meet you there in an hour. I'd stop my programming, get in the car, drive across town, show a house, and come back and continue working.
See, what's interesting about this is like not everybody, especially then, that had the ability to program could actually be a real estate agent.
Correct.
As well.
And vice versa.
Sure, exactly. Well, absolutely, without a doubt. Like that's, yeah. So those are two, that's like a very
Correct.
type A personality, that just
Right.
do what you got to do to get it done.
Listen, a lot of things had to come together all in the right time and right place for me. I mean, Boca was the perfect place to be doing this. My background in marketing, my programming skills, and my real estate knowledge, and my sales knowledge, everything. But that's always the case. That's, you create your own luck.
Create your own luck.
Agreed.
For sure.
What was your educational background? I think this is important to,
Yeah. So I actually went to yeshiva. So I went to like rabbinical school. I used to feel that I learned nothing there that helped me earn a living. And I literally started, when I was talking earlier, working in the shipping department. It was literally minimum wage. Literally didn't have enough money for food. So I didn't appreciate my education. But I will say now that I'm older and wiser and have lived through a lot, that I did learn one thing.
Just one.
Well, but one big
thing.
thing. I did learn how to think. We spent a lot of time in yeshiva analyzing ancient legal ideas in Jewish law, and whether or not it's applicable today or not depends on your religious beliefs. But regardless of that, it definitely taught me an analytical thinking process that has helped me in every aspect of business, 100%.
And that's what I say my background in mechanical engineering has given me, despite it's very different from what I do today.
Right.
It's a thinking degree.
Correct.
It's very analytical. It helps you think logically and structure systems, which is what you
Correct.
were doing, which I was doing. But
Correct.
what's really cool about this is you didn't go to school for coding.
No.
Self-taught. Yeah.
Self-taught. And let me tell you, back then when I built that, it would take me days or weeks to do what should take an hour because I didn't know how to do it. I would literally go on Google and I didn't even know what I needed to know.
Yeah.
I just knew what I was trying to accomplish, but I didn't even know what to search for. I would just search for, well, how do you make button do blah, blah, blah in blah, blah, blah language? And that would lead me down all these rabbit holes. And then I'd say, oh, there's a function called such and such in that language. Okay, now let me learn about that. And that would lead me something else. And then weeks later, I'd be able to sort of make it do what I needed it to do.
Once you know the right question to ask,
Correct.
right? I love that process of like trying to figure something out, getting to the point where it's like, I don't even know what to ask. I don't know what I don't know. And then that you figure out, oh, this is the question I need to ask that will yield the answer that I need in order to solve my problem. Yeah.
Right. Listen, we all grew up before the internet. I remember when, if you wanted knowledge, you had to buy a book, go to the library, and then finding what book, there was no internet.
Yeah.
So knowledge, was hard to come by. Today,
It took work. It took effort.
it took work. That's why you needed university much more than you do now, or you needed to know someone who taught you, or you needed to have access to the information somehow or other. Today, with the internet, there's really no excuse for ignorance. Anything you want to know how to do or it's all out there and easy to find and easy to learn if you want to.
You just have to have the curiosity. Not everyone has
Yes.
that. They're either not born with it, or they don't.
Correct.
They're too lazy, or whatever it is.
Correct, but
Yeah.
before the
I
internet,
agree.
you could have been driven, you could have been motivated, you could have been a genius, and you just could have lived
Don't
on
have
a
access.
farm and never had access to the
60 miles from a
information.
library. Yeah.
Right.
No, I get it. So let's pick up where you left off. So you're starting to drive leads in. You're still more or less a one-man shop. When did you start bringing realtors in?
Right. So the way I did it was like this. I'd get someone off the internet. I'd get them in my car. I'd show them a house.
Mm-hmm.
I'd sell them a house. Then I would turn around and recruit the listing agent. So I remember one of my first deals. To this day, I remember the client's name. I took them into one of the country clubs in Boca, and I showed them everything available. And they didn't really like anything that was on the market, but they want to be in that neighborhood. One of the listing agents I met showing all those houses, actually, I give him a lot of credit. He did something none of the other listing agents did. The listing agents, they don't care about you. They don't care about your client. They're just showing their listing. But this guy called me up after and said, so how'd they like the house? So we start talking. I tell him why they don't like it. And he says, well, tell me what they're looking for, what are their criteria. Let me see what I have, which listing agents don't usually do. They're like, show my listing, take it or not, whatever. So he says, I have a house that's off the market. Why don't you bring them there? And, knowing what I know today, this is how you get screwed. This is how they steal your client. But it's not what this person was doing. He was a good guy. And I was so new in the business. I was like, okay, you know what? My best chance of closing this deal, which would be the biggest deal I've ever done, is let me just go along with this guy and see and see what happens.
Yeah.
So I bring them to his off-market listing. I didn't even know enough to ask for a commission agreement or anything like that. Took them there, and they liked it, and they bought it. And I got paid. And I didn't even realize at the time how I wasn't protected, and he could have not paid me. But I got paid on $1.7 million in 2006 when my highest price sale at the time was like $500,000.
It's a nice commission.
I was like, okay. I'm like, I can do this again. So a few months go by, and I have another client for the same neighborhood. So I call up the same listing agent. So he says, we have another one for 2.2 that we had on the market like 2 years ago. We took it off the market because just nothing is selling. We could bring them there. So I'm like, okay. And they bought it.
Pretty nice.
So long story short, I hired that listing agent.
Okay.
That's great. Good
Because
start.
all I had to say was, actually, it was a husband-wife team. They said to me, like, who are you? Where did you come from? And where do you have all these buyers? And I just said, I don't know these people. These are strangers off the internet. And I have many more where they came from. I can't call them all back fast enough. If you come work for me, I'll give them to you.
Pretty easy sell at
Right.
that point. Yeah. The hardest thing for realtors is getting the leads, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's, there's other things that aren't easy, the negotiations and all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes, but the hardest thing is getting those leads, right? I mean,
especially in today's world.
and today,
Right.
especially
So
today.
look, everyone knows real estate pays well. Whether it's $1 million deal or a $10 million deal or even $500,000 deal, it's worth your time. The problem is we just need more deals. That's what, if you ask any realtor, that's what it is all about, is about getting more deals. It's not about the actual deals, the commission rate, the drama. There's drama on every deal. The work, there's work. You always have to work. The problem is getting more deals, right? So if you could give a realtor more deals, one way or another, whether that's leads or whatever it is, whether it's a referral program, whatever it is, if you can increase the number of transactions, the total amount of commission generated by the agent, then you have no problem getting a piece of it versus just taking the same pie and trying to slice it up more ways and say, hey, I deserve a piece of what you generate. That's a tough sell. And the brokers that don't add value have to compete on price. And when you meaning higher commission splits, when you compete on price, it's always a race to the bottom.
Yes.
But if you could add value, in the presence of value, price is not an issue.
No. So give us a sense for, now your brokerage is taking off. Give us a sense for how quickly you went from 0 agents to one, well, I guess it was a couple.
Right.
So 2 agents to where you ended up.
I remember my first few agents, there was that one. Actually, I think there was one agent before that was a client who I showed houses to, and then and moved down here and wanted to be a realtor, and so brought him in. And so the first few were slow. I remember in 2007, so it really wasn't, maybe a year and a half in, then I remember I was maybe 15 agents.
And 2007 was when the economy tanked.
Right. So then we got into 08, 09.
Yeah, things were slow.
Right. So the real estate business wasn't even viable anymore. Everyone had given up. You couldn't make money selling real estate. The only problem was I was so busy that I didn't get that memo, so I didn't stop trying.
With all the buyers leads, because prices were tanking, but people were still buying property.
Right, I know, but my point is,
people were being foreclosed
a
on.
lot of it is all starts in your head. If you think, if people convince you that the sky is falling and real estate is crashing and that we don't have a business anymore, you're probably not going to do any more business. So that's why it's important to really be in control of your beliefs.
Were you still doing a good amount of deals, or were you just busy working on the business?
No, I was doubling the business every year throughout through
that chaos.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's interesting. So my mom, this was in New Jersey when I was growing up, because that was around the time she was in real estate up there as well. She had a similar experience. She didn't get the memo. Right. Yeah. She was and her model was very different from yours. Her model was very old school, door knock, but she was religious, disciplined, and had a system. And she just continued to crush it straight through all that. In fact, she did better during that time. And I bet you might have felt that way too.
Right. So there's another thing to think about here. The real estate market, whether we're in a buyer's market, seller's market, crashing market, prices are up, prices are down, none of that really matters to us as brokers.
I agree.
All that matters to us is that properties are changing hands. It doesn't matter at what price. I understand that if a property trades at $1 million versus $2 million, the commission is half as much. I get that. But it doesn't matter for, two reasons. First of all, you can make it up in volume. Secondly, I don't even believe you're going to make half as much, because maybe the property is worth half as much, but people's budget, if someone's going to spend $1 million, they're going to spend $1 million. So now they're just going to get twice as much house, but they're still going to spend $1 million. So you're still going to make your $30,000.
That second point is critical.
Right?
Yeah. People can afford what they can afford.
Right. And as long as people are buying and people are selling, then there's a place for us. Provided that you run your business in a way that, like, a big mistake I see is listing agents who are big time, famous, superstars in their neighborhood, listing agents, but they won't work with buyers. I will say that they don't work with buyers because that's more work, and because there's no guaranteed paycheck unless you make a sale. Whereas a listing, you have it locked up, it's money in the bank, blah, blah, blah. They're spoiled. They don't want to work with buyers because they have 15 listings on the books. I think that's a big mistake. First of all, if you're just a listing agent, then when it becomes a buyer's market, you're stuck. If you're just a buyer's agent, then when it becomes a seller's market, then the buyers don't need you anymore. So you never want to be strictly one or the other. You always want to do both sides. Think about it this way: why does someone list a house with you? Ultimately, you're to sell it, and the only way it sells is with a buyer. So really, when they list with you, they're hiring you to find a buyer. So you got to have buyers. Why would they list with you? If you went a listing appointment and said, Mr. Seller, I refuse to work with buyers. I'm going to take your listing. I'm going to put it on the MLS. If the phone rings with someone who wants to see it, I'm not going to take the call. They're not going to list with you. They'd be crazy to list with you. And the same is true with buyers. Buyers don't usually shop for a realtor. They shop for a house. The realtor is just how they see the house. So if you don't have any inventory, if you don't have any listings, unless it's 2006 and you could take the whole MLS and put it on the internet and make it look like it's your listings, then why are buyers calling you? But if you have listings, you'll get buyers. And then if you have buyers, you'll get listings, and feeds on each other. You got to work, I believe you got to work both sides of the equation.
And I know, Larry, in your business, you really solicit listings, but you also work with buyers, and you have a team built around you that does show properties, right?
Totally. And I
you subscribe to the same theory, right?
I personally work buyers as well, still to this day. But yeah, more listings help you bring in more buyers,
Correct.
right? So like it's kind of this, like, to your point, it's kind of the circular thing. Or to your point, when we're calling on neighborhoods, we circle prospect, we cold call neighborhoods. When we can call and say, hey, we actually have somebody who's interested in the home.
Right, correct.
Like to your point,
Yeah.
it's just, there you go. So yeah, so all of that, it's the synergies between all that. You got to do it all.
Correct.
You got to do it.
And it all feeds on itself. It's an engine. So,
Yep.
and once you get larger and you have a lot of agents, then as a company, you're fine if you have listing agents and buyer's agents. But as the mentor whose job it is to make those agents successful, I'm not going to tell them, oh, you just do listings and you just do buyers, because it's not good for the agent.
True.
Agreed.
True.
Agreed.
But anyway, in 08, 09, the prices didn't matter. Things were selling. There was a lot of bank owned. We ended up having a number of agents who did just bank owned properties. Properties were still changing hands, so there was no reason that we couldn't be
Still
a part of
money
that.
to be made.
Yeah, sure.
Good.
I also recently did this math with a coach that I'm working with, and we were just looking at how many homes transact in Boca or transacted last year in Boca, and how many I did. And you look at that math, and it comes out to like the percentage of deals that I've personally done compared to the deals that have transacted, like 0.001%, right? So like when you look at it like that, you're like, this is a no-brainer. There's so much space to do more deals.
Right. So two things. First of all, there's so much space, and secondly, it's so fractured. Nobody owns the market. It's not, you have like 0.1%. There's no one who owns 10%. In fact, even as a brokerage, it's changing now over the years. There's been a lot of consolidation. That's a whole nother topic to talk about with consolidation and acquisitions, all of that. But even so, with the big companies buying up all the little ones, still nobody owns the market. It's still very spread out.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So how many agents did you get up to? Let's kind of fast forward this a little bit. So we
like
know your business model.
So from then to 2014, I grew the business to 250 agents.
Wow.
Doing about 4,000 transactions a year.
Wow.
Generating about 20-something million of gross commission.
Wow. Per year?
Per year.
Yeah. Just commissions, yeah. And if you did
gross commission. So the way, as a broker, the way you make your money is you have gross commission, then you have the commission you pay out to the agents, and the difference is your gross revenue. Then you pay your overhead, and then what's left. And it's a tough business. Just taking, because here's the thing: a lot of realtors are not business-minded people, which is kind of crazy. But a lot of them are not, and they don't understand the difference between top-line revenue and bottom line. And they say, "Oh, I brought in $1, so I want to keep as much of it as I can." And you want 20 cents of my dollar? That's a lot. What they don't understand is that 20 cents is my gross revenue. From that, I have to run a business.
Right.
So and if I'm taking 20% and you want a 5% raise, that's actually a 25% cut to my half of the equation, right?
Right.
So it's a tough business to make there's an old joke in this industry. So there's one broker for every company, and then there's however many realtors, right? But the broker is the broker in charge. So when the joke is that when you become the broker, you become broker. Because all realtors complain they're broke, right? Then you become the broker, you become broker.
That's good.
For me, it was different because 50% of all the deals that we did originated from my lead system.
That's very, very different.
So you take any agent, and if half of their deals came from you, we're not even talking 80-20 splits. We're talking 60-40 splits, something
like that, or 50-50.
It depends. It would range from 50-50 to 80-20, depending on the agent's experience and book of business. So if you come in, you know what you're doing, you've been doing this for 10, 20 years, you have a whole book of business, then sure, I can pay you 80%. If you come in and you don't know anything and you need a lot of training from me, and your close rate's going to suck because you don't know and you're going to learn the hard way, and you're not bringing any business, it's all my clients that you're going to work with, well, then 50-50 is an opportunity for you. And usually people were somewhere in the middle, because what I would like is a blend. My goal for everyone was that half of their deals should be self-generated and half should be from the company. That way I know the company's adding value. You're making more money. We're making more money. But you're not completely dependent
on your leads.
Right. And there were agents that were completely dependent. And it got proven with time as things went on. And we'll get into it later in what happened with the business. But there were agents that were on my leads for 10 years, and then they moved on somewhere else and the business dried up.
Yeah, I bet.
And that's a problem, because I was the one generating the business. I was the one putting my time, my money to generate that. I know the true costs of acquisition of a customer. The agent is not paying for it. They say they're paying for it in their split, but if they burn your leads, it doesn't cost them anything. But if you understand the true cost of acquisition of a new client in any business, then you understand that it can't be a one-shot deal.
Right.
It's just not, it's not a viable business. You have to get repeat business. You have to get referral business. And if you're on a lead program for 10 years, remember, people move statistically every 5 years. So theoretically, if you sell houses to new customers for 5 years, and if they all come back to you when it's time to move again, after 5 years, you shouldn't need any leads. You should have a book of business. If you're on a lead program for 10 years and you move on and your business dries up, then none of them came back.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
That is a problem. So one thing that I can definitely attest to is that in a good number of communities around Boca Raton, through your SEO optimization, through your lead generation, and then putting that together with a quality realtor that you help build their business, many of these communities were dominated by your realtors, that they, back to your point, where you fed them leads for a number of, let's say it's a year, 2 years, 3 years, and then they did turn those leads into the good ones. Not everyone, right, of course, but that's the power of leads combined with a quality realtor. Who knows what they're doing.
So agent would come to me and say, how do I get myself established in this country club? So I say, okay, well, start with leads. I'll give you leads in that community. Go sell a few houses. After you sell a few houses, you have some reason why someone should list with you. You could go on a listing appointment and not look like a complete idiot. You can't just, and people do this. They come into a neighborhood. Maybe they have some business experience from before. They have some money to fund it, so they do postcards and they blanket the community and they get an appointment and they go in. So, how many houses have you sold in this neighborhood? None. Okay, how many houses have you sold and where have you sold them in total? None. Okay, so why are they going to list with you? They're not. So I say, take the leads. It costs you nothing. You're a new agent. Take the leads. Follow up with them as best as you can. Chase them down like you're hungry, which you are. Go sell a few houses. And now you made some money. You got some experience. You have some bragging rights. Now take a little bit of the money that you made, or I'll pay for it, whatever our deal is. We'll take some of the money we made together, and we'll now invest in marketing in that neighborhood. And our pitch is very simple. Listed us because we have the buyers. And then don't forget what I said earlier. You got to continue to do both sides of the coin. And then you dominate a neighborhood. You have the buyers. You have the sellers. You have the sellers because you have the buyers. You have the buyers because you have the sellers. And once you get yourself established like that, it's pretty hard to unseat you. And that's why you can go in to some of these country clubs, and there are some agents there that are
dominate,
ancient,
that
still have a fax machine,
and they've been there for 30 years, 40 years,
and they can't, and it's hard to unseat them. And
they
didn't get there the way I'm talking about. They didn't have leads. They were there before the internet. But my point is, once you get yourself established as the go-to person in the neighborhood, even if everyone hates you there, they're still going to list with you. Because if think about it.
We can name names, but we won't. Yeah, well, there's a few of those around here.
When you list your house, you're on the way out, right?
Right.
So what, you're going to stand on ceremony? You're going to teach this guy a lesson? You don't like him? You're going to give it to the underdog? No, you're out. You want to give it to the guy who's going to sell
the same guy you hate, but who's going to get it done. And you like your money more than you like proving a point.
Of course.
That's great. So another thing, before we get into how you sold your brokerage and then moving on to your investments and other things, there's a couple important things that we didn't talk about that were also secrets to your success. One is, I visited your old brokerage before you sold it, and I was very impressed at the operations. You had a really great CRM, customer lead, kind of management system that you built, proprietary, that you actually built, programmed it. Mm-hmm. It was really impressive, where someone would go on a website, they'd register their name quickly, easily, log in, and then you could see all of their actions, everything they've done on the website, what properties they're searching for, and that would trigger follow-ups. And you had an inside sales team, and then you had the outside agent sales team, and those two teams would work together fluidly, which is awesome.
Right. So I actually think you're referring to the operation after I sold it.
Okay.
It has since...
You were still involved in it.
That's involved.
I don't want to get too far down that rabbit hole. But
right,
yes.
right. So that was a little different. After I sold the business, they set up a call center, inside sales, to cultivate the leads and then pass them off to the.
But based on your CRM software that you
it
built.
was based on the same system. The original idea was leads come in and get it in the hands of the best possible agent as soon as possible. And the best possible agent is not my best agent. It's the best agent for that lead. And it's not about, and people really didn't understand this, there's always people trying to lobby for the better leads. It's not about that. It's about the best lead for you is not the most expensive lead. The best lead for you is the one that you could slam dunk and you could do it easy, and we'll do it again next week. That's the best lead for you, whether it's 200,000 or a bank-owned property, or it's oceanfront, 10 million, 20 million.
Personality is important.
For whatever,
Experience in a specific area is important.
Correct.
Right?
So the personality part was the harder part because these are leads, and this was, we did not have a call center in the beginning. It wasn't designed for that. So we didn't do any screening. We didn't talk to the leads. We had no idea who they were, unless you want to make assumptions based on their name on the screen. That doesn't, only goes so far, and not a good idea.
Yeah.
But what we do know is where they're looking. So if they're looking at such and such country club and have an agent who lives in that country club with 15 listings, that's the guy who's going to get it. And if I have one on the waterfront, and I have an agent who has those listings or has just had some sales like that, then that's the one who's going to get it. All things being equal, the ones who follow up better, of course. And then ultimately, I used to track the close rate.
Of course.
So ultimately, we're here
Leads
to sell
go to
houses.
closers.
We're just here to sell houses. So.
Yeah. Great. So about what year did you get into discussions and end up selling your brokerage?
Right.
Yeah. So
it actually took
exit.
It actually took a couple of years. It's something I started exploring for personal reasons, and actually that kind of shifted over time, and I kind of didn't have those motivations anymore to sell. But at that point, there was already interest, and then a deal was put on the table, and I didn't say no. Although I do regret that now.
Do you?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Why?
Well, let's get to the numbers first, because I think the numbers will help you understand maybe why. So cash flow, you talked about.
Right. So my bottom line,
commissions.
right. So listen, a typical broker, if you're bringing in 20 something $million of commission a year, you're probably making a few $100,000 bottom line, because you're paying out 90%. And then you're paying all your overhead, and you're paying some guy to make the website, and you're paying, I looked very recently. I looked at a local company that was looking to get acquired, and they had a lot of agents, and I was like salivating over the idea of I could just save a few years of
plug in,
build, just take them all. The problem is that they have a lead program. They don't have the in-house expertise, so they're paying through the nose for leads, and everyone's on 90%. And the guy's making, with 100 agents, he's making barely a living. No wonder he wants to sell it. So that's hard to take all that and then bring it in and just kind of it's not structured right, so it's going to be hard to take that over. But that's beside the point. We were doing 20-something million in gross commission, bottom line profit in my pocket after, I expensed whatever I could to the business, still $3.5 million a year.
Nice.
And this was 2010, 2011,
right.
12.
So probably
double
that based
days,
on numbers today.
And I had agents then making $1 million a year. Now, these days, it's not unheard of to have agents make $1 million a year. But back then, nobody made $1 million a year, let alone a realtor. And I had a handful, not all 250 of them, for sure not. But I had a handful of people that were $1 million earners. These days, they're all still doing very well and probably doing much better just because the numbers.
Property prices have doubled.
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
But the good agents took what I built and they leveraged it to establish themselves, and they're still going strong.
So in summary, you had a cash cow that you had built,
right.
And you had one of two choices, and one choice was keep this cash cow going, tweak it, improve it, try to grow it, or exit.
So I had some personal motives. I wasn't around so much. I felt that this thing had just grown to be so much bigger than anything I ever dreamt of. Remember, I came from nothing, and now I had this. Yeah, I was making a lot of money, and that's fine. A lot of that annual income goes to the IRS, and then when you're running a business like that, you're not watching costs on your personal life too much. You don't have time for that, so you're spending a lot of money. And I just figured, you know what? There's too many eggs in this basket. It's like my whole net worth is in this thing. And I wasn't around so much, so I thought it was the prudent thing to do. But I do remember I had a friend at the time, completely different industry, and we would just talk sometimes. And I told him what I was thinking, and he said, "Don't sell it." He said, "You're confusing two things. You're confusing running the business with owning the business." He says, "All your motives to sell are related to running the business, not owning the business." He says, "You could sell the business, and you're not going to escape from all these concerns you have, because you're not going to be able to distance yourself from it. You'll still get sucked back into it. So you're still going to have all the stresses of running it. Only it's not going to be yours anymore." He says, versus go hire a CEO. Go hire a top-notch CEO. Pay him $1 million a year.
Yeah, who cares?
Sit here with your feet up and cash checks for the other two indefinitely. Or maybe he'll grow the business and you'll be back to making 3.5 again and won't be involved. I didn't take the advice. I should have, because he's 100% right. That's exactly what happened. Sold the business, was out for a very short period of time, got recruited back in, wasn't mine anymore, wasn't making the money anymore, and was more consumed in the operation of business than ever before. And that's just the nature of the beast. That's just how it is.
But on the upside, you got a very nice payday out of that, and then you also were getting paid to continue operating the business on an annual basis, right?
Sort of. So the way these things work when you sell a business is it's based on a multiple of earnings. So I basically got 6.6 times earnings. So you take that they like average, it's like 3.3 something times 6.6, $20 million.
Nice. North of 20 million. Very nice payday.
But here's the thing. It's 6.6 years, right? That means if I would have owned it for 6.6 years at the same level, I would have taken that same amount of money. Mm-hmm. So I have to ask myself, where was I 6.5 years later? Well, 6.5 years later, I was still working there. So at that point, I literally could have had the money and the business and been in the same place. Right?
Right. I get it.
So it's all, I think it wasn't a bad deal. I think I got a very good deal. I don't know anyone else in the industry who sold a real estate brokerage for 6.6 times earnings.
Agreed.
And the reason I got it was because of the software, because it was all in-house, it was all proprietary, and it was responsible for 50% of the revenue. Show me another broker that can say that, and they could probably also get 6.6x.
Right. It's because you program the CRM software and the SEO optimization.
Right. So at the end of the day, it's because the business that I sold was not a collection of independent contractors that could all walk and take the business. No, 50% of the business was generated by the company, not by the agents. Mm-hmm. So I got a good deal. I'm not saying it was a bad deal. I think that the takeaway is, if you're going to do something like this in any industry, any business, if you build something, you're going to sell it. I think you need to, number one, you need to walk away. And number two, you need to have a plan of what you're going to do next, which is very hard to do when you're in it and there's so much at stake and there's such a big payout. You don't, as a prudent conservative business owner, you don't think about, how I'm going to spend my money. You kind of just focus on the target and say, you know what, when it actually happens, then I'll think about what comes next. But that's a mistake. It's a good idea for spending. Don't go buy a jet because you're going to sell your business. That would be stupid. So in that sense, it's good to be conservative and wait until the money actually comes in before you start thinking about those things. But you do have to think about what you're going to do next as far as business. What are you going to do with that money that's going to earn you more than what you've been earning? Or how is this, at the end of the day, in 6.6 years or in 10 years, how are you going to take this money and end up in a better financial situation than you would be if you just cashed the checks every year until then? That's the part that I probably didn't think through, or I underestimated how difficult that was.
Yeah, and to keep up the lifestyle that you want too, because with whatever savings that you have or equity or what your net worth is, what are you going to do with that capital and that equity so as to continue the lifestyle that you want to live? Everyone needs to do that analysis, especially if they're thinking of retiring or even semi-retiring, like you were kind of sort of semi-retired.
Right. So if you're retiring, it's an easier calculation, because here's a lump sum. Here's how many more years I'm going to live. This is what kind of return I can make investing it somewhere safe. And this is what I'm going to live off, and just stick with it. Yeah. But I was way too young.
Yeah, you were in your 40s when you sold this. Yeah. Oh, exactly. So let's do a easy transition to, I want to get into your investments, but let's talk about what you're doing now with your new brokerage. So you recently opened a brokerage, relatively recently.
Right. In the last 2 years, I jumped back in. So basically, my thinking is twofold. First of all, since I sold, there's been a huge consolidation. A few of the big national firms have gone around the country and bought up all the little independent brokerages. I don't think they pay 6.6.
They don't.
No.
I think they pay like 3
with an earnout probably.
Right. Something like that. We've had discussions with people. So yeah.
Right. They've bought up brokerages. They've also bought up agents. So regardless, it's been a huge consolidation. And I think that something is lost in all of that. So when you work for a small boutique local company versus working for a national, there's trade-offs. Going to the big national, you lose the local knowledge, you lose the mentorship, you lose no one's going to help you with your deals. No one's going to help you with your bottom line. You're going to give up all of the value add that you get from your broker in exchange for one thing, which is the brand. And brand is important. Obviously I understand branding, but I think as a realtor, the brand is probably, or at least it's been pushed more than it needs to be. Homeowners really could care less what broker you work for. They're going to list with you because of what you've done in the neighborhood. And they're going to work with you as a buyer's agent, however they got to you, because they feel comfortable with you and they trust you. Agents change companies all the time, and they don't skip a beat. And nobody even knows what company you're with now. It doesn't matter. Yeah. So seeing all of this, I see a vacuum. There really aren't too many independents left. And I know how many agents I have helped build successful careers. And I know that, so those agents that I coached 10, 15 years ago are doing great right now, and they don't even need me now. But agents who are where they were back then, where are they going to get their career launched? By joining one of the big brokerages that have tens of thousands of agents, and now you're just another name. It's like, welcome to XYZ Brokerage. Here's your business cards. Let us know when you sell something, and we'll take a piece of it. No one's going to launch your career for you.
True. I have a lot of conversations with a lot of agents because we look to bring on team members as well, and I think there's a large truth to that. They try to these bigger national brokerages. They try to kind of create that local feel by creating little teams or structuring support staff in a hierarchy that works. But not always is that perfect, right? It's all about the people, right?
Right. I mean, look, I'm not knocking them. They're doing something that I'm not doing. They're much bigger than I am, and they're public companies and they're making a lot of money, so good for them.
Yeah.
But I have to say that in my heyday, the money was great. Obviously, someone once told me that in business, your checkbook is your scorecard.
Yeah.
Right. So it's certainly, the money is nice. Money buys nice things, but it's also rewarding because it's the scorecard. It says, oh, you're succeeding. But I have to tell you that all of that was very good. But the other rewarding part was making a difference for my agents, watching agents' careers take off and like life changing. I'm talking like many, and it affects their whole family. So you take a guy or a girl and you bring them in and you teach them the business and you give them leads and you coach them, and now they're making 5 times more than they ever made in their life. That changes them, their spouse, their children, their whole...
The trajectory of their whole family.
Right. Yeah. And even today, as you know, now, you know, it's not easy now to recreate what I did. And that's what I'm trying to do now. And it's, you know, right now I'm in the phase of doing the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
And it
takes time.
Takes time. And you got to really fight for every win. And even during this phase, you know, what's really rewarding to me is every time I see one of my old agents out there really killing it. That is rewarding to me.
Good. That's great.
Do you feel it's still doable? I mean, you're doing it.
I do because 2 things. Because I think there's a need for the local independent company. And also, SEO has changed so much. It's so much harder. It's more competitive. It's more complicated. The technical know-how is much more. Yet, you know what hasn't changed? If you do keyword research, the amount of people every month that go to Google and type Brokerage Home Real Estate is literally almost exactly the same as it was when I got started in the business.
Oh, interesting.
And if you can be the top of Google for any one of those key phrases, then the rest is the same. And I go to Google, and there they are, some of my old competitors that I used to beat, my old company sometimes beating me. But there they are. They're all still putting huge money into it, and someone's getting to the top, and they're still running their business. So the same business model still works, and I think that once you get there, there's more of a demand for it from the agents than because there's fewer options. It's much harder because if you go to Google for any of these keywords, you have Realtor.com, you have Zillow, you have Trulia, you have a few of the national brands all competing for those top spots. But then you also have a few locals, and those are competitors who I used to beat. So I should be able to beat them now. They have now 20 years of history there, and I'm new. So that's a big challenge for me right now because longevity is a factor in ranking. But just keep at it till I get there. I honestly, like anyone who's ever built a business knows that there are times where you want to give up, and you just have to keep going. I can tell you that I'm in it this time around now, just about 2 years. If not for my last experience, I might be saying, I don't know, Mm-hmm. But I know what happens when you get there. I know it's worth it. And I know what to do when we get there. And I know I can get there because the other people who are there are people who I used to compete with, and I always beat them. So I just need to stay the course.
I think that's inspiring.
Yeah,
as
I think
we're
it is
both
too.
brokers in the same market, but I'm rooting for you.
No, that's great. Well, it's whatever, 0.1 versus 0.1
right.
or
That's my
0.2.
point.
So
Yeah. No,
right.
no,
Yeah,
exactly.
your success doesn't affect his success.
No,
and
it's
vice versa.
interesting because you talk about our competitors, and I guess we're technically competitors. I've been friends with a lot of my competitors over the years.
Of course.
And then other people are very weird about it. And it's like, there's enough room for all of us at the table. And it's good to play nice with your competitors because at the end of the day, this whole business model relies on co-brokerage. So I don't want to burn bridges with you. I want to be able to call you up if one of my agents or one of your agents are having a problem.
Yeah.
That's valuable.
Keep deals together, not break them apart. So no, that is inspiring. And I know, Larry, on your side, I mean, you do a number of different types of outreach marketing sales. It includes your cold calling. You've got a team for that. But although I don't believe SEO optimization is necessarily one of your core competencies or core focuses, but you do some Facebook marketing, I think. And so you have an online presence as well, right?
We do a lot of stuff. I obviously don't have his skill set, right? So I don't have your skill set, and which is like a huge advantage. But yeah, we do some similar things in the SEO front, but more so on video, and that's a newer endeavor. That's maybe 6 months to a year of work, and same kind of idea. It takes a while to get the outcome that you're looking for.
Are you doing video on YouTube?
YouTube video, yeah.
Right, so you know that they say that YouTube is the #2 search engine in the world.
Exactly, which is why we chose to focus there, since my brand is very much me focused, right? We're not building a brokerage like you built with a ton of agents. It's a brokerage with me, my mom, and maybe a couple of agents that work on the team, basically.
Right.
And that's really how we've created our business. So the YouTube channel, which also takes a lot of effort, doesn't require the coding.
No,
but
it's different. It's a different skill set, but it's still the same. People who don't do what you do or what I do, it's easy for them to watch from the outside and poo-poo it and be like, oh, you're lucky, or, oh, you just happen to know something I don't know. But no, it's a lot of work.
It takes a lot of work. I didn't appreciate, and we've hired a coach to help me do this and all these things to get this YouTube channel up and running. And man, I didn't appreciate how much work it really is.
Yeah.
And we're constantly talking about, this is taking a lot of time to do this. How do we condense that time to put out the same amount of content?
Well, let me ask you a question. I'm just curious. This is not really like my thing, but is your goal from the YouTube channel to monetize it through YouTube, or to drive actual real estate customers?
Drive actual real estate customers. I mean, if you're a big international, national brand and you can drive like a ton of views, you can really monetize YouTube, and that might be the model you want to go with. But if you're a local business, I think it's huge. I think being very dominant on YouTube can create even more money than some of these big national brands that are monetizing YouTube, but you're doing it through selling your business services, whatever that might be.
Right.
So I'm a huge believer in that. It's just, you got to put the work in. You got to, we got the full-time video guy, John's here, doing his thing. And there's so many other aspects to it from an SEO perspective.
Sure.
So yeah, we're super excited about that. And then also, hopefully we can kind of use that video also to bolster our website with
video content
and other blog type posts on our website, which hopefully will also increase our SEO. But the core focus first is like, let's get this going. Let's generate buyer leads or seller leads on that. We've gotten some traction to a degree, but it's not where we want it to be yet. Yeah.
So how long have you been doing this?
We've been serious about like really putting up the content correctly for the past maybe 6 months.
Okay. Yeah. So let me just think about this the way I would with traditional marketing. So let's say you do postcards to neighborhood. So you send a postcard a month, let's say, right? So one of the many lessons I learned at GE is that when you run a TV ad, someone has to see your ad 5 times before they notice it, right? So that means think about it for a second. Think of some ad you've seen on TV for some whatever. You could all think of commercials, right? If you could think of it, you've seen it at least 5 times. So if you translate that into real estate marketing, because this is a mistake that agents make. They have a sale, so they send a just sold postcard. Look at me, look what I did. And then nothing happens. And then, the next time they have a sale, or maybe they never have a sale in that neighborhood again, or maybe it's a year later. So then they'll send another one. And nothing happens because nobody remembers that one postcard that they got. And now they get one again next year. It's the first one again because it's too far apart. If you send at least one a month, then after 5 or 6 months, people will notice you. So great. So now the people in the neighborhood know that Larry's a realtor. Okay. That doesn't mean that they're moving today. They have to get divorced, get married, upsize, downsize, relocate. Something has to happen to make them want to move.
Right.
So now you spend 6 months, and now someone just noticed you, and now you give up because 6 months and nobody called, right? So I always tell people, if you're going to do postcards in the neighborhood, which I believe in doing, you have to do the work up front, analyze your competition, analyze the opportunity. There's a lot of things to do before you pull the trigger. But once you pull the trigger, don't even reevaluate it for at least a year. You could have literally someone who, 6 months in, 8 months in, literally took your postcard and put it on their refrigerator and says, this is the guy I'm going to call then, when I'm ready to get divorced. And then by the time they're ready, you're a distant memory because you didn't
continue, you didn't stay
Right,
consistent.
you have to stay
in
with it.
front of. You have
And
to
I
stay
would
in front of
say,
people.
like with what I do, the goal is you get people to come in from a Google search and you get them to register one way or another. And now you have them in your database. And now I have the responsibility of, for the next 2 years, staying in front of them until they're ready to do something, right? But I have them in my database, so I could send them new listings. I can stay in front of them. But I think, I don't know too much about it, but I think with what you're doing, someone watches your video, you don't know who they are. So you have to stay in front of them through your channel until they're ready to reach out. So it could be 2 years.
Exactly.
Someone watching this video today could call you in 2 years from now. So
that's why, like, one of the metrics is like subscriber, like how many subscribers are you adding? Because if they're subscribing, it's likely they're going to start seeing some of your new videos, right? Correct. Yeah. So
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So let's transition to your investments, because that's also interesting as well. Okay. So I know you've been investing in property. I mean, you talked about your three homes that you bought 20-some years ago. Sure, a long time ago, but you still have one of them.
Yeah.
But tell us about some of the different investments that you've invested your money in over the last 10, 15 years and what types of investments you still have. Yeah.
So I will tell you, first of all, as brokers, we get so busy running our business and generating commission that I think it's very easy to miss the opportunity of investing along the way for yourself. You see a deal sometimes and you know it's a good deal, but you'd rather broker it and take the commission. Just put yourself on your list of most important clients, and it's not going to hurt you. It's not going to hurt your business. People say, who's going to come to me if I take, I only give them the leftovers and I take the best ones for myself. And it's not true, because any buyer who works with you does not expect that he's your only buyer, right? He knows you have endless other buyers. And everyone, especially in commercial real estate, I like to say that residential real estate is B2C and commercial real estate is B2B, right? So you're dealing with all professionals. This is not a housewife looking at pink tiles in a bathroom and deciding they're not buying the house. This is a business person saying this is a good investment, it's a bad investment, and this is my return, so on. So they understand that they're not your only client, and they understand that it could be a great deal, but they can't do it right now because of another deal they're doing, or timing, or size, or location, or whatever. So it's a good deal, but not for them. So it's good for someone else. So put yourself in that mix, and no one's going to fault you for it. And if you buy things along the way, at the end of the day, when you're done working and done earning commission, you'll have a portfolio that will take care of you. I think I made that mistake with running the business, making all this money, and there was a lot of years there I didn't buy anything, and that was really the whole reason I got into this to begin with, right?
Yeah. But you get so busy.
But you get busy, and earning new money, bringing new money in is always a priority. But just find time to.
I like what you said there, though, about just at least put yourself on the list of VIP clients. That's all. Right. That's true.
There's room for one more client.
Room for one more, yeah. I know you've done a little bit of that. You've found properties along the way that you've invested in too, right?
Totally. I mean, we all get this. We all buy from other brokers as well as stuff that maybe comes direct to us, right? I mean, and we know those other brokers have other buyers, right? Sure. Especially when we're getting these off-market commercial opportunities, right? It's like, they're shopping it to us. Sometimes maybe if you have a close enough relationship, they'll come to you first and give you the first few hours to say yay or nay. But a lot of times they're shopping it to like 5 of their top guys.
Right, but if you are doing the work, if you do a bottoms-up analysis of every deal and just say, does this deal make sense to me or not, then you don't care who didn't take it or who shopped to it before. The only time you care about that is if you don't know what you're doing and you're just trying to see which way the wind is blowing. So, everyone wants this, I want it. Nobody wanted it, then I don't want it.
Yeah.
That's not
That doesn't work.
That doesn't work.
Yeah. Agreed. And that's how I entered the business. I fortunately, that's how I started thinking about everything I do here locally. It's like, oh, do I like this or not? And if I like it, I'm like super excited. If I don't like it, but I know I can broker it, I'm like, okay, that's great too. But like what gets me peak excited is like, oh, do we have a deal to do here?
So
of course.
As a broker, so this time around, I'm doing one thing different in my brokerage. Last time it was strictly residential. And I can't tell you how many times residential clients turn around, all these strangers off the internet coming to us, wanting to buy a house, moving down from up north. You put them into a new house, and then they turn around and say, can you find me a shopping center? And we didn't have the expertise. We would try to refer it out, which is hard to get paid. And then you put your reputation on the line, and then it's just
some other broker does a bad job and you burn your bridge because you referred them to them. Yeah.
Right.
So you can control you with your knowledge. So you might as well do it.
So this time we're just doing both from day one. It's a different skill set. Not all agents can do it, but we have agents that are residential. We have agents that are commercial. We have some that do both. But we have it all in-house. So if a residential agent comes into my office now and says, hey, I just sold this house in Woodfield and the guy wants to buy a strip mall, I'll say, okay, we can help you. Like we have enough people here that can do that.
Good.
So
what types of asset classes are you in right now personally?
a little bit of everything. And I've learned a lot of lessons, some the hard way. So, just back to your point of, deals being shopped around, there's this old notion that if it's on the open market, off market is the good stuff, right? Because if it's on the market, that means that all the people got shopped who didn't take it. First of all, I don't know if that's true, but even if it is true, just because nobody took it doesn't mean anything. People say if it's on LoopNet or Crexy, then it's stale. And
where deals go to die on LoopNet, they say,
yeah,
right? But that's not true. I bought a deal off of LoopNet.
Yeah. So I was just going to say, my best deal ever, I bought on LoopNet. And I can tell you about. So this was.
Give us some of your wins.
Okay.
I want to hear.
This was probably the numbers aren't so big, but home run. So I bought this in 2014, right around the same time I was selling the company. I started, once like the deal was hard and I knew it was going through, I started looking around at real estate deals to put money into. And I came across this deal. It was a gas station in Boca.
Oh, I know this.
Yeah.
And it was right near my house. And it was on LoopNet. And
by the way, this gas station is one of the most unique gas stations I've ever seen.
Everyone knows
literally sits on an island in the middle of the busiest traffic pattern in all of East Boca.
That's why I bought it.
Yeah, it's like a crossroads of like 6 different roads, and it's sitting right there.
But let me tell you, that this property was sitting on LoopNet forever. This was 2014. It was sitting on LoopNet, and I called and I spoke to the listing agent, and they were asking 1.5. Okay. And I was interested. I was sort of negotiating, seeing what I could get it for. And then the closing of my business happened. So I kind of got distracted. And then that whole transition and a couple months go by, and I circle back to this, and it's under contract. So I think I was trying to get it for $1 million.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
From 1.5 down to $1 million?
Yeah. So if you know the location, there's a Chase that was built right next to it, and they had tried to, Chase wanted to buy it when Chase built Chase, because then they'd have till the corner, and they wanted too much, or they didn't want to sell it. Then Chase just bought next door, so they kind of boxed them in. So now it's kind of landlocked. It's limited in what you could do with it. But the owners didn't appreciate that or understand that, so they were like, no, we want 1.5. But once Chase had built next door, it really wasn't worth it. I thought 1 was the number. Back and forth, it went under contract. So, okay, whatever. Life goes on. Maybe a month later, the broker calls me and says, this was December, and he says, the buyers want more time because they want to do a phase 2 environmental study. It's a gas station.
Makes sense for a gas station.
Yeah. And my sellers don't want to give them time. They want to close before the end of the year. This is December. So he says, so do you want it? So I said, sure, but I also need to do a phase 2. I mean, it's a gas station. And he says, no, they're not going to let you. So I said, and this is something I believe in business, anytime you want to say no to something, before you say no, just rephrase it. into under what circumstances could it be yes, and just put it out there. And maybe it won't happen. Well, then it will be a no. But if it does happen, you'll have a win. So instead of just saying, no, I won't buy it without a phase 2 environmental, I sat down and I said, okay, what is the downside here? What will happen if the tanks are leaking? I need to dig up the whole place. I need to knock down the gas station. And you can't even have a gas station. What's the downside? So then what's the land worth, right? So I said, okay, I'm going to take 25% off the price. For $250, for $750, I don't care if the gas station's not there anymore. And I don't care if I have to do cleanup. So I said, all right, you want to close in the next 2 weeks? $750. We settled on $775. Today, that gas station's worth $3 million.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a nice win. Yeah. That's a nice big win.
It's a triple net.
Yeah.
I do nothing but get direct deposit every month. They pay the taxes. They repair the building. They repair the roof.
Insurance, everything.
It's if you look at the cap rate, it's off the charts.
Okay. Huge win.
Huge win. And I did that simply because I live on that street. So like I didn't need to know anything else. I know that corner. I know that I was just buying the corner. Now, if you go to the other side of the state and you look on LoopNet and you see a gas station, it looks just like it, and there's so many things that seem similar, maybe, but you don't know what you don't know over there.
Exactly.
About the intersection, about future development, even just about the market in general. But
local knowledge, micro markets, we've talked about this, so important. That's why all the properties I bought are in the Palm Beach, Broward County area within 30 mile radius, more or less. I'm open to buying elsewhere, because right now our prices are so crazy.
That's the
and you
thing.
can find 10% cap rates, and my friend's trying to get me up to Western North Carolina to get up there to look at properties, but I don't have that local knowledge unless I have someone I really trust, like him. Actually, I do, because he lives part-time up there. I would trust him, but you need someone that you trust. I wouldn't just go by in Indiana or Michigan, or
right.
I don't know the market.
Correct. So a couple of things on that.
Yeah.
First of all, Florida has been, for the last 25 years, just been booming across the entire state. And the old saying, rising tides lift all ships. So I look at all the hundreds, if not thousands of deals that I've looked at over the years, and you turn down 99.99% of them, right? And looking back, I shouldn't have turned down any of them.
Just buy.
You can't buy all of them, but I could have bought any of them.
Sure.
The point is, I should have just bought earlier, and it didn't even really matter so much what I bought. I say that, but you also have to be careful. I did also have some deals that you can lose money in real estate. I've always thought, it's real, and you have the dirt, and even if things go terribly wrong, you just sit tight. I owned residential properties through the crash of 08-09. And on paper, they were underwater. I owed more than they were worth. You just keep collecting the rent. If you have a vacancy, you just hunker down and you get through it. And now I didn't lose any of them, and now they're all fine.
Sure.
So that was my thinking. Having said that, I can tell you about other deals where it's been very painful. So
I know about one of them. Yeah. So give us the one out in Clearwater. Yeah.
Okay. So in 2020, I said, it's time to really take this to the next level, to crank this up. I can't keep, being so conservative and sitting on so much cash and scrutinize everything so much, so afraid always of what could go wrong, because you could always come up with reasons not to buy something.
Oh, yeah.
I said interest rates are so low. Leverage, we talked about this earlier. Leverage is the key to real estate, and yet at this point in my life, sitting in 2020, I had zero debt. Zero debt. I'd paid off. So after I sold the company, I'm sitting all this money, couldn't really find enough good places to put it to get great returns. So I started paying off mortgages. So, my old house I used to live in, the one I built in West Boca, I still own it, had a mortgage on it. In fact, I bought that house for like 4 something, and I refinanced it at 8 something when I started Broker Executive Realty. That's how I funded the launch of the business.
Wow.
Well, then I was way underwater when 08, 09, but you just keep going. So I said, so I paid off that mortgage. I paid off the mortgage on the townhouse, paid off whatever debt I had, because I don't know, it just felt good not to owe anybody anything. And I was sitting on cash, which was not the right thinking. And I know that now. But in 2020, I was starting to come to my senses. Interest rates were at historic lows. I said, now's the time. If you buy something now and you lock in a mortgage at 3%, then that's what you're paying for the life of the loan. And while the property will go up, the payments won't. It's really simple. So I started looking for commercial properties, but I started expanding my search throughout the state. I said, I'm not going to go out of Florida because, like I said, Florida is booming. It doesn't matter where in Florida. Even if it's the wrong location, eventually it'll get dragged along with everything else. Whereas if you go to other states, there are plenty of places in this country where a piece of real estate today is still not worth what it was 50 years ago, and it may never be, and just never coming back. Sure. So, it's not, but in Florida, that has not been the case. So I started looking. I find a building in Clearwater. It was a really nice deal. I still think I wasn't crazy to do this. Some things are just unforeseeable. 55,000 square feet with 120-something thousand square foot parking garage.
There's an office space. Office, yeah. Nice
Which,
office.
Everyone says office is so terrible right now. And I understand what's happening right now with the office market, for sure. It's cyclical like everything else. I liked office, and in theory, I still like it. But right now, it's tough for office. This was before Corona, early 2020. I find this building. I go to contract. I'm in due diligence. Corona happens. Everyone says the sky is falling, stock market. It crashed. All of a sudden, on paper, I had a lot less money. And I really didn't think that Corona would become what it did. I didn't think it would last as long as it did. I thought it was all nonsense. I still think it was all nonsense. That's neither here nor there. But I didn't think it was going to go on for 2 years like that. I'm like, this will blow over in a month. But I saw it as an opportunity to renegotiate because clearly everyone was saying the sky was falling. So I had a few days left on due diligence, and I tried to renegotiate, and they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't budge a penny. And I said, I think they were asking $6.2 million for this building. I was under contract for $6 or a little over $6, I don't know. And they wouldn't budge a penny. And I remember just saying, listen, I don't know what it's really worth right now. I don't know if no one was coming into the office anymore. I'm like, I don't know if they're coming back to the office next week, next month, next year. I don't know. But what I do know is that the environment we're in right now is not the same as we were when we went to contract 2 weeks ago. So something has to get, so I canceled. So 6 months go by, late 2020. Now Corona's here to stay, blah, blah, blah. And they come back to me. So I went back in the deal at a lower price. So I saved a few $100,000. I went in, and it wasn't a big discount, but I went at 5.8. I'm like, okay, fine. It's fine. It's all good tenants. Everyone's still paying their rent, even though they're not coming in. It's fine. It'll turn around.
And there was upside to it, which was that there was what percent, like 30 or 35% that was empty.
So it was a 6.5 cap and 65% occupied. So to me, and it was a gross building. So that means that the expenses are all pretty much fixed.
Yeah,
Landlord's paying all the expenses. So if you fill up some empty space, it's straight to the bottom line. So I said, all I have to do is be a good agent. And I understood the issues with leasing agents and management. A lot of the big brokers, they want the management and the leasing. If you don't give them both, and they don't show it, and even if you do give them both, if someone walks into your space and says, "Oh, I don't like this. I don't like the build out," they take them down the street. Versus, what do I need to do to make it work for you? Yeah. So I said, I'll just list it. I'll do what I have to do to fill it up, and it'll be a win. And I don't think I was totally wrong about this. So I took a loan. I was able to get a loan fixed for 5 years at 2.2%.
It's incredible. And that's commercial. That's crazy. Commercial. It's the lowest I've ever seen.
But that's because I have a lot of money with that bank invested in the stock market or whatever. And I gave a personal guarantee. And the reason I did that was because I was buying it for 5.8. I was putting down 2. And I just simply said to myself, I will not walk away from $2 million. I don't care if the place is vacant. I don't care, what I have to write out. I'm not walking from $2 million. So I might as well get the lower rate by giving the personal guarantee. So that was a mistake, and I've learned the hard way why that's wrong thinking. But I did that, bought the building, and I wasn't wrong, about most of those assumptions. Something happened that was unforeseeable, that you can't plan for, you can't avoid. But when that happens, then it makes you reevaluate all that thinking.
Totally.
So About a year into it, leasing was proving to be hard because Corona was still going on, and there just wasn't a lot of office leasing activity going on in Clearwater. So I was about the same occupancy, just chugging along.
Still 6.5 cap though, right?
Well, yeah, but I had debt service. But yeah.
But you're at 2.2%.
Exactly. So the way I like to look at it, I always believe in simplifying things. Because if you could just boil it down to just dumb it down, then it's easy to look at it and just make decisions. So your margin, every business has margins. Your margin is the difference between your interest rate and your cap rate. Yeah. So if I'm paying 2.2 and I have a 6.5 cap, so I'm cash flow positive, and I'll just use that money to do build outs to get new tenants or whatever.
But by the way, that spread is better than most of the deals we do in place, mind you. You didn't even have to do the work to get that spread.
In theory,
even if it was 6, right?
This is why I was really excited about this.
Yeah.
With upside, with possible upside, right?
Right. Yeah. And in like every other real estate deal, even if you don't hustle to capitalize on the upside, time is on your side. Because every month, another payment is sent to the bank, paying down your debt. And every month, inflation is happening. Every month, prices are going up. And come back in 10 years from now, and you'll be fine. Okay, so a year into it, we were doing some maintenance in the garage.
The parking garage.
The parking garage. The parking garage, I paid $106 a foot for the building. And I'm thinking, that's justifiable just for the building, without the garage. And the garage I know what it costs to build a garage. I know the cost of a spot in a garage. So, I don't know how I'm going to monetize that. I don't know who needs to park there. I have hundreds and hundreds of spaces in this 5-story parking garage, but it's got to be worth something. That was my simple thinking, which is not wrong. But anyway, we were doing some maintenance, really minor maintenance. We hired a contractor. He hired a subcontractor. It was right before Christmas. And the subcontractor was welding some brackets on the staircase, and he did it incorrectly. He started on the 5th floor. He worked his way down, welding them while standing underneath them. And the thing collapsed, and he lost his life.
Terrible.
Very, very unfortunate.
Tragic. Yeah.
Obviously, loss of life doesn't compare to whatever financial losses,
monetary losses, but
obviously that's horrible.
Sure.
But the reality is, I never met this guy. I didn't know he existed. I didn't know that the contractor subcontracted anything out. I hired a contractor that came highly recommended to do some routine work. And the net result is, I'm sued for wrongful death. If you read the lawsuit, I sound like a murderer. Literally says, if not for me, he would be alive, which... Yeah, if I didn't hire the contractor who didn't hire him, then he wouldn't have been on the job. But I mean,
right. But you're hiring them for this specific purpose of repairing the stairwell, and then
right. But the way they make it sound,
right?
Oh, there was a building collapse, and the owners don't care about people's lives, and all this narrative. So now I get sucked into a wrongful death lawsuit. The garage is closed. Because you don't have the so it's actually interesting. So the garage is actually, to this day, it's still closed.
Wow.
It's actually structurally fine. It just doesn't meet code without the second emergency exit. Right. So on each end of the building, there's emergency exits, and one will then collapse. So without that emergency exit, it doesn't meet code, but it's actually structurally fine. We've had so many engineering studies done. It's structurally fine. It doesn't meet code. The engineers all concluded that the cause of the accident was, so there's something called shoring equipment. You have to shore, the shoring equipment was still in the guy's truck. So, but I'm the bad guy. But anyway, it doesn't matter. The lawsuit was settled. The insurance company paid. I still have a battle with the insurance company. Now they say they shouldn't have paid, and they want me to give them the money back. So that's an ongoing lawsuit. So I don't really want to talk about that. This is 2 years later.
We can skip over that
dealing with
part,
that.
but you're
the garage is
still dealing with litigation.
The garage is still closed. So it's hard to bring in new tenants right now. I haven't taken a penny of distribution. And then the bank, the wonderful bank who gives me such wonderful rates because of what a wonderful client I am, basically put the screws to me because they could. So think about it. Now it's 2023, right? And interest rates are 7-8%.
A lot more.
Right. And everyone knows that the office market is not doing well. And the banks don't want any exposure to office market. So this big bank that I won't name decides to do something, again, something I learned the hard way, I didn't really appreciate going in, called technical default. So I was current on all my payments, never missed a payment. It was on auto pay from day one. It was never going to miss a payment because I was always committed to this and I wasn't going to walk away from my $2 million. But because of the incident with the garage, and because that affected my revenue numbers.
Oh, I see.
They were able to put me in default and force me to pay off the loan.
You're not maintaining that debt service coverage ratio.
Right. Yeah. So now I had to pay off the loan. So now I'm sitting today with this building that still has a closed garage, that still has litigation, that still can't put new tenants in. And I own it free and clear.
Yeah.
So you own the building free and clear now because you had to pay it off.
Right.
You had to pay off the mortgage.
So I have $6 million tied up in this nonsense that I haven't seen a penny from, and it's like a second job. Every day I'm dealing with nonsense related to this. So yes, it's real estate, and all the things I've always said are true, but there's a lot of lessons, takeaways that.
Well, what I tell Zev is, I always try to look at the glass as 10%, full, or instead of 90% empty, or vice versa. The key here, though, is that imagine if Zev didn't have the cash to pay that loan off. You'd have a foreclosed property.
Yes.
You'd lose $2 million.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. But
because it's highly likely that another bank wouldn't have lent to you.
Right.
Based on this whole parking garage
scenario. I couldn't have refinanced it with litigation.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, I realize that.
So that's, in a way, the tragedy and the bad circumstances that have occurred here, you're blessed that you have the ability to bail yourself out.
Yeah, but if I could go back in time, what would have been better?
What?
Suddenly, this makes sense to me. I never really appreciated or liked the people who think this way, but in this scenario, it suddenly made sense. So the typical way you buy commercial real estate is you get temporary financing up front, or even you pay cash up front. But that's all temporary. Then, as quickly as possible, you're refinancing. You pull out all of your money, and now you've removed all the risk. And then something like this happens, then you walk away.
And you're not personally guaranteeing it.
Right. So the lessons I learned is you don't personally guarantee. I could have done a different kind of financing. I could have paid much more. And back then rates were lower, but I still could have paid, let's say, 4 or 5%, which was astronomical just 3 years ago. Why would I waste that money on millions of dollars? That's a lot of money when I can get this for 2.2. Could have taken out a loan like that for a higher LTV. And now they gave me a good rate. They had to give a personal guarantee, but they also gave me a very low loan amount. They actually gave me a higher loan amount, but they didn't release all of the money. So I actually paid like all the doc stamps and that on a higher amount. And what they told me was when you lease up the space, then you take a draw and you won't have to go through a refi. So it sounded good to me. But I could have just done a different kind of loan, even hard money.
Non-recourse,
highest LTV possible. And let's say I had $1 million at risk. When this accident would have happened, I would have walked away. I would have gladly written that off. Instead, now I've had to throw good money after bad, and I'm still not out of the woods.
That's the 90% empty, part of it. Yeah, no, I get
I'm
that.
just saying that what I would do different next time.
Sure.
You have to. So I
have to learn.
I think the bottom line is you have to think about and figure out how to remove risk.
Well, yeah, I get that. Yeah, well, this, it's a tragic situation, but in anyone's investing career, you're gonna have your wins, you're gonna have your home runs, and then you're gonna have your stinkers.
You're gonna take some hits, of course.
We've all had some hits. I know I've had at least one too, but you got to just keep chugging.
Comes with playing the game, right?
It does. Yeah. In games, there's winners and losers, but. So to wrap up here, though, Zev, tell us How can people contact you at your new brokerage, ZFC Real Estate?
Right.
And-
So new brokerage is ZFC Real Estate, ZFC.com. It's very easy, 3-letter domain name.
Again,
Great.
Or just go there or just Google me. You'll find me. It's very easy
Awesome.
to find me. We are about 13 agents right now.
Good. And growing.
And
Yeah.
growing.
I didn't realize you had gotten so big so quick. Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
It's growing.
It's growing.
Yeah.
One agent at a time.
That's it. And you're looking for new agents too, right?
Sure, absolutely.
Sure. Anywhere in Florida, right? More or
Anywhere in
less?
Florida, but I mean predominantly South Florida.
Sure. Great. Awesome. Any other questions, Zev?
this was awesome. It's always awesome hanging out with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same
Nice
here.
to see you guys.
Thanks for coming in, Zev. We'll put your contact information in the
Sure.
description of the video. And if you enjoyed this content, please like or subscribe the video. And thank you.